You're listening to If Only I Were Wiser podcast, where Raina Wilson brings together wisdom and raw life stories to provide encouragement and truth. So many times it's easy to become discouraged in your own pursuit of health because your story or circumstances look drastically different from your favorite influencer or even the expectations you had for yourself. If that is you, welcome! This space is for you to learn, breathe, and maybe just listen and see what wellness could look like for you. Hey friends, welcome back to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast. On today's episode, I am super excited to dive into a pretty new topic we haven't touched on here before. And with me, I have Wendy Snyder, positive parenting educator and family life coach. Wendy is a wife and mama herself and understands the days of overwhelm that comes from being a parent. But she realized through her own experiences there had to be a better way than the threats, punishment, and bribery to fix her child's behavior. And now she's done it, a firm and kind approach to parenting where she shares all the details and tips with you in this episode. So let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome, Wendy, to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast.
Thank you for having me, Raina. I'm so happy to be here.
I know I say this. I feel like I say this for every episode. I'm so excited for this interview, but I really am, because I don't think we've had this kind of specified conversation. We've kind of had like a loose, gentle parenting, quote, conversation before, but I would just love to hear your heart, how we can be practical about this. But let's start by hearing a little bit about you.
Yes. So hello to everyone listening or watching. I'm Wendy Snyder. I am what I call a powerful parenting coach, which is firm and kind, connection-based parenting. And I'm a family life coach. So I have an organization called Fresh Start Family. We have students all over the world and curriculum that helps families learn how to influence their kids, especially if you've got a strong-willed one, with dignity and compassion and empathy and that firm kindness element that is so important, because a lot of times positive parenting just gets a really bad rap when it's actually very powerful parenting. Because what we do is we teach families how to influence their children to cooperate and listen because they want to, not because they have to. And once you remove the fear element of using fear as like your main tool, or any type of external kind of manipulation or coercion, then you step into like true power as a parent, and you have kids that you're incredibly close with, and that feel connected to you and listen and cooperate, again, because they want to, not because they have to.
Yeah, I love that. So what does your family look like? What is the day in the life of Wendy right now?
Oh my goodness. It feels chill on one hand, because I've got teenagers now and they don't need you to like do all the things. But then it feels crazy because we've just got so much going on. My daughter, who is my strong-willed one, she's almost 17. My son just turned 14. And my daughter is really gunning for a D1 beach volleyball scholarship. So we are like knee deep in college emails every night. Every weekend is some type of college recruiting tournament, training hard, mentorship, all the things, supporting her on all different levels of that. And so there's just a lot of go, but it's a beautiful season of life. And every day I spend coaching clients. We have a program where we have coaching, we have education, and then I also host a podcast called the Fresh Start Family Show. So life is busy and wild and wonderful. And Taryn, my little guy, is a big surfer. Stella's beach volleyball. Daddy's a creative. He also co-hosts the podcast with me. So that's kind of a day in the life of Wendy.
Oh, yeah, how fun. And that's so exciting. Definitely, I think the midst of our personal life is, hard toddler stage. I have immediate friends that are in the depths of, the 0 to 6 range. So we'll definitely touch on that. But I would love also to just dive into, teenage years, because that's like off in the distance right now. But I have friends that have teenage children. It just spooks me a little bit.
Yeah, spooky. Yeah, you know what? It's amazing though, when you decide that in your lifetime you're going to make learning and growing and healing and doing parenting in this way, which takes a lot of investment and intention and commitment. But when you decide that you're going to do that in the first decade with your kids, you will reap the benefits in the second decade. because it is just an incredible model to have children going through adolescent and teen years, to be able to solve problems creatively and connected as a team, to have like
Yeah.
strong emotional literacy in your home, to have kids who understand that mistakes are just opportunities to learn, not something that you need to hold shame about or be
Mhm.
harmed and humiliated about, to be able to have kids that really tell you the truth and that are honest with you instead of hiding and lying and covering things
Mhm.
up, kids that take responsibility for their mistakes quite easily, because they weren't raised in an environment where they got shamed or harmed when they
Right.
made a mistake. Those are just some of the things, but it all that comes from doing the work in that first decade when your kids are little. Now, it's never too late. If you have someone listening that
Mm.
has teenagers, please
Yeah.
start now. Trust me, start now. You'll be so thankful at the end of your life that you did. But for a lot of people, they find this work like I did when my daughter was 3, and then you're just kind of in the trenches the first 5,
Mhm.
6, 7 years as that first decade, and then you start to hit a groove that second decade for most people.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned just right now that your daughter was kind of the start of this. How did you guys actually dive
Yeah.
headfirst into taking this approach, not only for your family, but equipping other families as well?
Yeah. So I went into parenthood thinking that it was going to be like easy peasy. I was always really good with kids. I was a springboard diving coach from the time I was like 13 to 26. And I had nannied in college and I was just like, dude, I got this. And
Mhm.
Terry thought too, he was like, you're just really good with kids. So when we have kids, it's going to be kind of it's going to be easy peasy. And then we had kids. And Stella, we could tell from birth, she just came out with this beautiful spirit, this strength about her. We joke that like she held her head very high at like 3 days old. She was already
Yeah.
had like neck strength and was like a muscular baby versus like a
Mhm.
lot of babies we would hold with like tubs of goo, just like buttery. And Stella was just this, and we joke that she fought to get in. She didn't want to come out of my belly. Emergency
Mhm.
C-section, absent birth, really, really, really traumatic. And and so I was working in corporate and we had a nanny. It was amazing. And Stella did pretty good with the nanny, really well with the nanny. We were so close with her and things were going pretty good. And then I decided to have a second and I left my career in corporate to stay home with the babies full time because I was like,
Mhm.
this is going to be dreamy. I begged my husband, please, can we just figure out the financials? I'll do anything. We're going to be at the beach all day. We live in San Diego. The kids are going to
Yeah.
be napping. I'm
Right.
going to have time to work out. And it just turned really bad fast. Within like 6 months, probably sooner than that, within a few months, Stella was in timeouts all day long.
Mhm.
When the second baby came along, he had colic, just like the first, which was just brutal the first few
Yeah.
months. So Stella was constantly tantruming because with me, it was a different story than with the nanny. So her and I would
Okay.
really butt heads. I was trying all the traditional parenting tactics and punishments, and she would flare up worse. And it just became dark really fast.
Mm.
I was so ashamed that I was miserable at home when I had begged for this life. And I would look my husband in the eyes each morning and say, like, do you really have to leave? Because I have no
Mhm.
idea how I'm going to control
Do
this
this.
3-year
Yeah.
old,
Mhm.
and especially the crying baby. And then one day I went to drop her off at preschool, which she was having trouble at. I would
Mhm.
get a phone call every day at about 12:30 that, eventually it came to the point where they were like, hey, uh, I think you just probably should pick her up after lunch each day instead of having her stay till 2. She just
Mhm.
she's just not ready for the 2 p.m., right? But she was
Okay.
hitting or not listening, whatever it was.
Yeah.
That preschool, by the way, I now teach at
I
full
love
circle
that.
moment, which is
Wow.
crazy. But back then it was just mortifying. And I was like, what's wrong with this kid? What's wrong with me? Why can't we get control? Maybe there's something wrong with her. And then we walked in one day and there was a sign for a free positive parenting class. And I said yes, and that is when my whole world changed. I started to learn
Mm.
these concepts, and I sat in this classroom, and I was like, "Oh my gosh," my eyes were just opened to the fact that it wasn't just that I had this, like, wild and wonderful, strong-willed little girl. There was a lot that came down to, like, how I was seeing her, how I had been conditioned to believe, the way I was talking to her, the way I was disciplining her, understanding, like, who she really was and core needs of humans, especially little humans. Just everything I learned started to bring the light back to my day. And within a few months, I was starting to behave differently. And then
Mm.
she magically started to behave differently when I started to treat her differently and discipline her differently. And that's kind of how it all started. Probably a year or two later, I decided that our family had changed so much, and I was so thankful for this work that's when I decided to get certified, and that's when I founded Fresh Start Family. So Fresh Start Family is now almost a decade. So it started.
Wow.
I taught in town for a little bit locally, and then decided to open up the worldwide kind of situation where families, no matter where they live all over the world, could get this type of education and coaching and mentorship.
Oh, I love that. And I definitely resonate how you said earlier about, I think, starting this conversation from a place of like exactly that. I think gentle parenting, respectful parenting gets this bad rap on social media. You see all these reels of just like making a farce out of being kind, but holding boundaries.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I think for our family, it's having the spiritual and emotional conviction of not parenting out of fear and not
yeah,
parenting out of a place of shame and not doing it in the way that I think my husband and I were raised. And we both
yeah.
learned totally different things. But before we
Mm,
get, I think, into maybe like how to address the child, because we are deep in the big feels of the three nature right now.
yes, yes.
But I think in order to address that, I'd love to hear your wisdom on having to reparent yourself, because I would imagine coming face to face with some of these new techniques or modalities or perspectives, it's understanding, oh, me as a parent, my behavior has to change. My perspective has to change in the way that I approach my son or my daughter has to change because I might be working through something. Is that something you see with clients or have seen in your own story?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. So first module of our base kind of signature program called the Foundations course is all about paradigm shifting and understanding that how the old belief system, the outdated, it's kind of like the concept of, many of us when it comes to our cell phones, every few years we update, right? It's like, most people are not rolling around with like 30-year-old phones. There wasn't even phones at 30 years ago, right? So we
Yeah.
update, right? And so when we start with looking at what is the paradigm that we inherited, and the old school paradigm is a misbehaving child equals a bad child equals a bad parent. And that last part is like
Hmm.
really important because that's actually where a lot of the triggers come from parents. So if you got a wild one or if you just have a
Hmm.
kind of standard kid that is in a power surge season of life and melting down in the grocery store, a lot of times
Hmm.
that last part of the equation, the bad parent, is what sends us into these reactive patterns. But that is the old school paradigm. Misbehaving child equals a bad child equals a bad parent. And that's what many of us inherited because that's how many of us were raised, right? Like the parent thought that they had to get control of a child because that child needed to fear them. It was like smart parenting if you raised a child to please you, not embarrass the parent. Like the parent needed and wanted to look good, and that was based on the child's behavior. The new school paradigm is a misbehaving child equals a communicating child equals an
Mm.
empowered parent who has a full toolkit to parent, to teach, to guide, to model the behavior that they want. And so just realizing in the beginning, oh, there's a good chance that I'm seeing the misbehavior from an old school perspective. And how do I gain education and mentorship so I can feel confident
Mhm.
understanding child development, brain development, just basic kind of human psychology of how humans work, what drives their behavior. Then you start to be able to become more confident to see that, okay, this child's not bad, naughty, selfish, disobedient, bossy.
Mhm.
They just have
Right.
probably a strong need to feel powerful, either for all of their life, which is strong-willed kids, or they're in a power surge season of life. And then the other component of that you asked about it when it comes to reparenting yourself is like a lot. So I work with a lot of parents of strong-willed kids, and we always joke that the apple doesn't fall far. So
Mhm.
if you or your spouse have a very strong will, you're persistent, you're determined, you might be a type A, you go for what you want, maybe, whatever it is, a lot of times you're going to have a child that has similar DNA or at least most of the
Mhm.
time. And what we find is that a lot of people have never been taught how to love themselves fully with that big personality. We many of us grew up in homes. I wasn't like labeled the strong-willed kid. My brother was, but I
Mm.
definitely had a strong will. I think I just learned how to kind of fit in and hide behind my brothers like really strong.
Yep.
Like he was the one who always got in trouble. And I learned to like fly under the radar and like hide stuff really well and not like be too much in people's faces. And so I got away with a lot behind the scenes.
Mhm.
But looking back, I was very strong willed. And, but it's often teed up as like, well, that made you a pain in the butt. Like you're going to get what's coming
Mm.
for you. If you were difficult,
Right.
air quotes, difficult as a toddler or, had a mind of your own, like there's jokes, right? But it's like,
You're gonna reap what you sow kind
you're
of
going to
thing.
reap what you sow. And then many of us grow up and we never really learn to fully love ourselves. So we're very, very hard on ourselves. So if you make a mistake, if you read a parenting book and then you're like, I'm going to stop yelling and you yell by 8 a.m., you're going to justify and
Mhm.
defend it, but then you're also going to beat yourself up. And in your quiet, in the inside your mind, you might say, like, what is wrong with me? I should know better. What if I'm ruining my kid? So a lot of us have this very jerk. We're very, very hard on ourselves. And that
Mhm.
directly comes out with your children. So when you are very hard on yourself, like when you're good at being hard on yourself or have a strong inner critic, you will be very good at being hard on your children. And the opposite is true. When
Mm.
you are learn to be compassionate with yourself, when you learn to see mistakes as opportunities to learn, when you learn to see that parenting is such a human experience that there is no way you're going to get out of it without leaving marks, either emotionally or
Yeah.
physically, like every parent is going to, then you bring in more compassion. And when you bring in more compassion for yourself, you then are able to see a child's misbehavior in a totally new way that leads to less of a nervous system panic and more of an empowered response to teach and guide and solve problems as a team.
Mhm. So what would an emotionally regulated parent look like? So let's just kind of dissect the imagery of our
This
toddler
imaginary
tantrum.
creature, this
Yeah,
emotionally
right?
regulated parent.
Uh, right? From the lens of, cool, we had a complete meltdown at the library this week. Full big tears, you know, tantrum to get back into the car, like
Yep.
all that thing. Kind of what would an emotionally regulated parent look like from time that we're seeing the behavior to, all right, let's like reconcile and get to a place where we're both connected and can communicate clearly, which I've learned is really difficult with small humans. But I'm still trying to navigate it as a grown adult.
Yes, it's so true. The small humans, man, they are a lot. Um, well, I think this mythical creature of the the regulated parent, right? But no,
Mhm.
this parent is going to remember that they are different than their children. So they're going to have developed a skill set to be able to detach and
Okay.
remember that no one has the ability to destroy or devalue their feelings of worth and value. So that's kind of what detachment is, right? So it's like
Okay.
whatever's going on outside of me doesn't have to do with my value and my worth. My value and my worth is based on what I believe about myself, that together with God,
Mhm.
maybe if you're a family of faith, that you are rooted in, but it doesn't have to do with somebody else's behavior. So that's detachment. And this person also has developed healthy emotional literacy. So they understand when they're scared of judgment. They understand when
Mm.
they're angry. They understand as a parent is what I'm talking about. They
Right.
understand when they are hurt because a child just smacked them as they're getting in the car or said, I hate this family. You never let me do what I want. There's different ways that we feel hurt, right? Either physically or emotionally. But this parent is going to understand, oh, I'm having a big spike of emotion here as this child is having this meltdown. So we're both in a
Mhm.
very emotional experience. Just a lot of times we developed skills, not always healthy ones as we get older, but to like suppress those emotions. And
Hmm.
children, when they're really young, they just let you see, right? And they're not a lot of times educated or well versed or skilled yet at processing those emotions in a healthy way. And so a lot of times it comes out as unhealthy behavior. But even just the loudness is what triggers us a lot because we are so scared of judgment. So this regulated
Mm.
parent is just going to be very mindful of that in the moment. Like, oh, I'm really like this fear is really spiking for me right now. And also, I always like to say that um, all emotions are good. So there's no, in my opinion, no negative or bad. Some emotions do have like a lower vibration in the body energetically, but scared, for example, is an emotion that on the other side, when we allow ourselves to fully feel it, we will be able to be brave and courageous. Like the only way you are brave and courageous is if you are scared first. Like no one ever did anything amazing in the world that was super brave without being scared first. So scared is not bad. And especially if you're someone who is breaking a painful generational cycle and choosing to raise your children without fear and force, you are going to need bravery and courage to address that child in the parking lot with compassion and to have empathy and patience and to be able to get your brain into a place that you can call on your creative, curious, empowered, logical thinking, right? That's where like if you educate yourself and read books on methods or techniques or
Hmm.
ways to approach power struggles or meltdowns, that information is going to sit in the part of your brain that won't be able to be accessed if you're spiking out of fear, but you're suppressing it and your inside volcano is like building and you don't know what to do with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, so knowing what to do it in the moment, like, oh, I'm just really scared that the old woman is judging me. Like,
Right.
I love the older generation and they're sometimes notorious for throwing a little side eye, right? And so it makes sense. Okay. And
Hmm.
it's okay. I'm going to choose to follow through here. And it makes sense that I'm scared and you feel it all the way through and out. And then you choose to move forward with something that feels in line with you and who you are and your moral compass, right? And then, so, and then from that place, you're going to be more empowered to actually do the strategies. Because again, when your nervous system is like on fire and you're not doing anything about it, then the knee jerk stuff will come fast. And that's what your nervous system knows. For many of us, that's what we were raised with. Like it's going to be finger in the face, threat. If you don't get in that car right now, you're going to have no iPad this afternoon.
Sure.
I'm so sick of this. Like I'm done, right? Like I'm so done. Whatever.
Hey friends, I want to let you in on a secret. I fell for the hype that digital resources were all the rage and the way to serve your community last year. Hence, really the birth of Return to Rest, my ultimate rest resource. Now, that was birthed from a place that I am really passionate about rest. I have realized that us as women and especially mothers are lacking in ultimate rest. Rest in our creator, rest in our bodies because we're juggling so many things. We're trying to steward the health of our family and our kids and our spouse and ourselves, and we just keep chasing. Now, it doesn't matter the beef liver that you're taking or the red light sessions that you're doing if you are not rested. So, while Return to Rest really meets that need and gives you tangible ways to plug in actual habits that will reset your rest rhythms, I realized that something was lacking, and that is tangible accountability and community. So, since you guys are my loyal listener family, I'm letting you behind the curtain a little bit. Over the next couple months, I'm creating just that, taking Return to Rest to a whole new level and providing tangible accountability and community in a way that really will have to force us to transform our rest rhythms. Otherwise, friends, burnout is not just around the corner. It's going to be the name of the game for our family and for our hearts. So, if you need something to chew on until that comes out, go ahead and snag Return to Rest. I just dropped the price by $20 because I really want it to serve you. I want it in your hands and it's a reusable resource for whatever season you're in. And keep an eye out as name pending for this new creation is coming. I'm so excited and I really hope that it'll bless you because I know you need it just as I do.
understanding the emotional literacy part is huge. And then calling on the strategies, which is power struggle dissolving strategies, or helping a child process the emotions in a healthy way, ask for what they want. There's like all these strategies that we teach. And then the recovering from it is a different story. So that's like you get home and we always say that no one is a good learner when their emotions are heightened, and no one is a good teacher when their emotions are heightened. So you got to have some type of self-calming, self-regulation practice. And sometimes that's a kid falling asleep on the way home because maybe he was ready for his nap and maybe you thought, oh, we could just stretch it today by 30 minutes. A lot of these kids are so sensitive that if you push their meal or if you push their nap time, so a
Okay.
lot of times when they have the big tantrums or meltdowns, sometimes they'll get sick right afterwards. So we teach tantrums and power struggle misbehavior. It's two different things. Tantrums are often looming sickness, or they're tired, hungry, thirsty. And then the fifth category is sometimes it is from feeling powerless. So there's ways that you can address that. And then there's power struggle misbehavior, which is just a little bit different, not quite as extreme. And that's just like techniques and strategies there that will help you get your child's need to feel powerful met, which will then decrease misbehavior. So
Yeah.
later in a calm time, you would just kind of look at, okay, what do I think was happening there? Assess it from the angle of like, okay, what did we, it's like data, like what worked, what didn't at the library. And, maybe get some support from your mentor or whoever you study with, or maybe if you're just reading a book or a
Mm-hmm.
podcast listener, and you then create a plan for the next day. And then you would want to chat with your child and just say, hey, I think like earlier, I think that got a little out of control, right? Like we both
Mm-hmm.
were
Yeah.
struggling. And I think you were just X. I think you were just really tired. I think maybe you were feeling really mad that we had to leave.
Mm.
And I want you to know it's okay for you to feel mad. Mad is a good emotion, and teach about all the things why mad is so good. And here's how you can feel mad in a healthy way. Here's where we can talk, here's the next time you feel this is how, and then you might practice some things. If you've yelled, grabbed a wrist too tight, threatened, you would want to take responsibility for that in a very empowered way of like, hey, yelling is something that I don't want to do. You don't deserve that. And it's something that's important for me. And so I want you to know that I'm working on that. And then we teach makeups. Makeups is like a just really fun way to make amends with a child. And there's lots of different ways you can do that. But then you're modeling to your child, it's healthy and strong to take responsibility for where you got off track. And mistakes aren't shameful. They're just opportunities to learn, right? So those are just some of the elements that I would say like a regulated, emotionally literate, fluent person in this work would operate out of. Does that help answer the question?
Oh, for sure. I love that model. So how would you define or describe a strong-willed child? Because I think for myself, I'm like, oh, absolutely. We have the toddler that is innately boy, and we love that.
Yeah.
Will parkour off the bed because it's just his nature.
Yeah.
1,000%. Have we probably told him 500 times not to parkour off the bed
Yeah.
because, you know,
Could be a broken arm.
injuries,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But I think that we've definitely wrestled with, I guess first we can dissect the strong-willed child, but also how do we navigate young, like strong-willed children
Yeah.
that are in the midst of trying to learn how to communicate well. They don't even know what mad is yet, versus maybe your children
Yeah.
that are in early adolescence, teenagers that have a little bit more of a concept of communicating what they need, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think you asked the first question is strong-willed kids. Like, what are they? How do they present? So there's the way I see it is there's like true strong-willed human beings who are just designed perfectly to have this huge need to feel powerful bucket. So the way we teach like
Mm,
the basic needs of humanity is the need to feel powerful. Every human has it. The need to belong. It's like the those two are the biggest drivers. Like humans will do a lot in order to get those filled. They need to feel valuable. They need to feel unconditionally loved. They need to give love. They need to feel safe. Those are kind of the biggest ones. And the strong-willed human, who's again designed perfectly, nothing wrong with them, and they need a lot of mentorship to develop that personality into a kind, respectful, contributing member of society, right? Like just like the
Right.
kids who are the soft-spoken, easygoing, like they need mentorship and guidance to develop that personality into an empowered, contributing member of society. All kids need mentorship. All kids need teaching. But the strong-willed kid just has this giant bucket. And basically, from very, very young, they're just seeking to feel powerful all over the place. And traditional parenting is very uncomfortable with that. So a child who pushes back a lot. So a lot of times the traditional description of these type of kids is, they might be described as defiant, bossy, mischievous, stubborn, cocky, arrogant, all these type of words. And I will tell you that that's definitely how sassy was one I used to call Stella when she was little. But then you look at like description of like world leaders that like you super respect, right? Like, so like Nelson Mandela is like high on my list, Martin Luther King Jr.,
Sure.
Malala Yousafzai, and they are defiant. They are determined. They are persuasive. They are persistent. And they are like, it's the
Mm,
same qualities, but they're just painted in this nice light, right? Like once you've done this incredible work in the world or are
right.
leading a movement or an organization. But when it comes to the little ones, we paint it as like this very negative thing because again, we're just oftentimes uncomfortable with it because it seems like an inconvenience when we just wish that they would just listen, right? But really, we're just mentoring and raising
Mhm.
a lot of times the world's next generation of leaders. And so knowing that it is strong to share power in your home, I think really helps with strong-willed kids because the sooner you can start actually allowing these children to feel powerful in as many ways as
Mhm.
you can, they will push back less in the world when their bucket has been filled up. The ones that are constantly getting their buckets stripped, which is oftentimes the traditional parenting model, it's going to include threats, overpowering, even bribery and rewards is external controls. So it's like the carrot is being held by the parent. And so the strong-willed child will feel that. Any type of overpowering, especially if there's traditional punishment, being hurt, harmed, and then being blamed for it. Like strong-willed kids have a giant hypocrisy like radar, and they are allergic to hypocrisy. And so they just kind of come out of their skin if
Mm,
someone is trying to make them do something and that person is not modeling that, which is classic parenting, right? Like do as I say, not as I do.
yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, the strong-willed child is wild, and they often, in my opinion and experience, and this is what is my story, they are the ones who invite parents into healing, and the parents who listen are the ones who step into an entire new trajectory of their life that probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this strong-willed child kind of raising some red flags and inviting them in to healing because there's nothing like a strong-willed kid to trigger you. Like you will just be so triggered by the strong-willed
Yeah.
child. And if you accept the invitation to learn, grow, heal, evolve, you will become a better version of yourself. And you will learn patience and empathy and compassion. And a lot of times, firmness that maybe no one ever taught you how to do in a healthy way, you will learn those things thanks to
Mhm.
that strong-willed child. Um, and yeah, when they are raised in a healthy environment as they get older, it's just really beautiful to watch what they can do in the world. Stella's gunning for a D1 beach volleyball scholarship right now, and it's just really fun to
Yeah.
see when that personality is nurtured and healthy. Holy smokes, it's a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah. Oh, that's so encouraging though.
And what was the second part of your question? Like you had said strong-willed kids, and then what else?
It was
There was
that
something
it
else
was
I thought.
that. It was that for the teenager,
Mhm.
and getting to see that manifest differently as they get older.
Yeah. Yeah. So the strong will, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I could riff on all the stuff just this work does for the teenager. But yeah, this specifically the strong will, when you're going for like big, big things, those seem to be the humans that do it, right? Like whether it's starting an organization, a movement, or going and like enduring that kind of stress that it takes. Because I do watch colleagues of hers right now, or I don't know what you would call them. They're not called colleagues, but I do watch a lot of kids starting to melt down and like lose their ish right now
Hmm.
emotionally because the
Yeah.
pressure is so high. But when the strong-willed child is mentored in a healthy way, like they have what it takes to do it, which is really fun to watch.
Yeah. Well, I was also thinking, kind of circling back to, let's say 10 and younger,
Hmm.
how would you encourage the mother or the parents that are wrestling with littles or maybe even older than toddlers that can't communicate needs? Like I've
Yeah, that
had
was the question. Yeah.
conversations with parents that either, their their 1 to 2.5 year old doesn't understand boundaries, but you could also have younger adolescents that have never experienced boundaries and also don't know how to communicate those needs. So I guess how would you encourage the parent that kind of is feeling that disconnect there?
Yeah. So, Raina, I'm not sure I agree that 1 and 2-year-olds don't know boundaries.
Mm.
They do. Where was I? I was somewhere. Um, Oh, yes. I was at a party. I was at a 50-year-old party for my friend Hafa, and there was the cutest baby. He was, oh my God, he was so cute. But he was like, I want to say 14 months or something. He was like just starting to walk, and he was like, and he kept taking these rocks and putting them in this like area that he wasn't supposed to. And then he would look at his mom and he would kind of smile a little bit. I'm
Uh-huh.
pretty sure that baby
He
is
knew.
understanding. I'm pretty sure I could tell. I was just giggling and I'm laughing and they were doing a great job with him. But I think kids do know when they are done in a healthy way. So, for
Mhm.
example, that little guy, he he does know he's just testing the boundaries, right?
Okay.
So his job, it's like developmentally appropriate for him to push on the boundaries, and it is our job to stick with the boundaries, right? And if that means picking him up and moving him when he's that little and saying very clearly, no, I'm not okay with you touching the black rocks that were in the barbecue fire, right? Like the boundary is no, right? Like we can play with this and I'm not okay with playing with that. Um, but our job is to make the boundaries very firm and follow through and do it in a way that's connecting, right? And like not going to drive our kids away or cause harm. Like that's the big ask, right? And when they push back, our job is also not to panic. So with little ones, I think just it might be helpful to not see it as they're not capable of understanding the boundaries,
Mm.
but just more of what will work to solidify the boundary with these kids. And we always say with younger kids, it's more action, less words.
Okay.
And so for really little ones, it's a lot of times it is picking them up and then empathizing when they're upset. Like, I get it. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
really upset. I know you really want to play with those black rocks. They're really cool. And the answer is no,
Mm.
right? Like it's a very firm, but you're moving them a lot versus trying to like say a lot of words or try to lecture, which we don't advocate for either, a little one that can't communicate. And if you want to give me more examples from your own experience, I can riff because I sometimes it feels good when I have like a real example to show you what the boundary would look like.
No, that was actually perfect because I think
Okay, good.
something that my husband and I had gone back and forth was maybe it's not having clarity in developmental stages for our son.
Hmm. Sure.
So that may have been the solution of like, oh, he can understand versus our assumption was he's too little, he doesn't get it yet if we were to set the boundary. So that was just really helpful to kind of explain that.
Yeah, and I think you're right that he doesn't get it yet, and that will take like a lot of times it just takes repetition, right? So I like to think of like Olympic athletes. And I got to see Lindsey Vonn speak, who's like the
Oh,
goat
cool.
of women's downhill, speaking of the
Yeah.
last month. And the amount of repetition that her coaches tell her is pretty wild, right? So just keeping that in mind that you're right. Like he's going to need or she's going to need repetition, but just knowing that like at the forefront of our brain, it's like they're capable and they're learning and it'll click one day. But for right now, we're going to have to say it probably
Hmm.
many, many, many times that the boundary is this. Like for my kids, it might be the time they're home or the helmet has to be buckled before they drive away. But a lot of times it just comes down to you 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 follow through, you follow through, you follow through, you follow through, like over and over and over again, and have an attitude that's more like, this is just what we do as parents versus why is this so annoying? This kid should know by now. That'll get in your way of following through with neutrality. Like thinking that the kid is purposely not getting it or thinking
Hmm.
they're incapable. That'll, instead of like, oh, this is just what we do. We make lunch every day. We change diapers. We take out the trash. We teach again. We're not okay, or this is what you can do. This is where you can be the parkour. This is, even if that takes walking them downstairs and saying, go
Yeah.
ahead, open the door, walk outside. I know it's cold right now, but I want to solidify. This is where we're comfortable with the parkour. And it's like a strong boundary instead of the annoyed, not doing anything about it.
Yeah. Wow. That is such a powerful reframe. One of the things I think you could probably speak to this more that I've seen with the pushback with like gentle and respectful parenting is what people perceive to be a lack of
Hmm.
discipline. Like it's
Yeah.
just, um, I've seen the jokes about it's just letting your kid have a full meltdown at the grocery store and they like walk all over you,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So how would you affirm boundaries or what do boundaries look like in a kind and loving way
Yeah. Well, boundaries, I think we
or
touched on. Yeah.
discipline?
So discipline, well, gosh, it's funny how um people I just now that I'm older, I'm getting old now, right? So it's now I just get to giggle a little bit at the fishbowl just when when people are have kids who are being human in a public environment, man,
Mhm.
some people are just so uncomfortable with that, where it's like,
Yes.
this is a human, these are human beings, this is a human experience.
Mhm.
Um, yes, kids pee their pants sometimes when they're little. Yes, kids have meltdowns sometimes. Yes, right? So I know when I'm just that example, when I'm at the grocery store or Target or on an airplane or anything, and a kid is melting down and the parent is being compassionate and kind with them, I always go out of my way to say, you are doing a great job and you're a great parent. And like, I just try to be that person who provides and normalizes that kids make noise, kids have emotions. Like, and then I
Right.
see the people who, I had one on an airplane just last month and I was helping this little 2-year-old. It was like the the easiest, best story of the power struggle, which we can get into later if you want me to tell the story. But this woman, she was so uncomfortable the entire time. And I was just watching as I was like helping this family and their little one. And then I was watching her and I was like, isn't that so interesting that her entire zone right now is
Mm.
focused on how it sure seemed like she just wanted that kid to stop. So I just think it's fascinating. So when it comes to discipline, what does healthy discipline, firm and kind discipline look like? Well, we teach it in a way that's kind of a 3-step approach when you're building out a compassionate discipline toolkit and replacing traditional punishment. And that involves self calming, natural consequences, and logical consequences. And we always have self calming go first and foremost when you believe your
Okay.
child needs discipline, which in our world is just teaching. Discipline is rooted in,
Mhm.
teaching and the future and helping a child learn a life skill, whereas punishment is often based in retribution and making sure someone pays the price and feels the sting and the pain of the choice that they decided to make. So self calming is always where we start. And that is basically always starts with us as the parent because you can't expect a child to walk away when they're mad at their brother and not smack them if you are not walking
Mhm.
away when you are upset with your child, right? If you're not taking
Right.
any bit of a calming break or a pause button, what is what we call it, or doing anything to calm your nervous system, you can't expect your children to be able to do the same when they're in a conflict or when they're triggered. So we always start people with self calming. That also applies in the grocery store. And then natural consequences is more when you let life do the teaching. And that's not going to always hit, right? So, like, if you are always trying to get your child to wear a jacket and they won't wear a jacket, and then you're going out to play and you're like, okay, I'm going to let them not wear the jacket tonight, and then I'm going to let them be cold, and we have to leave the block party early to come home because they're freezing cold, shaking, but they don't want to leave the block party because everyone's riding their bikes and skateboarding and having fun. That's an example of a natural consequence where you're going to actually allow your child to feel, and then you're not going to shame them for it. So you're just going to say, okay, what can you do next time? Well, what happened there? How can I support you so next time you're able to remember to put on your jacket? But it's like you let them own it. And you refrain from saying, I told you so. See what happens when you don't listen. That'll just negate the natural consequence. And then logical consequences is where everybody always wants to know the most about, is because this is what replaces a traditional punishment. And this is just where you get to be a really firm, kind teacher and hold your child responsible and teach them what healthy accountability looks like, teach them to make amends, repair relationships, and then most importantly, learn the life skill that they're missing that caused the misbehavior. So if you have kids that are fighting and putting hands on each other, you might create charts that are like, when I feel hurt, when I feel angry. And then they have 6 different options on how they can walk away instead of smack their brother. There's so many different things that we teach for logical consequences. We teach redos and role plays, which is like everything kind of stops and you don't turn on cartoons on Saturday morning until you have practiced the redo of the situation, right? So if you've got kids who are doing parkour every night and you're like so irritated and everyone goes to bed upset because you're like, I've told you 50,000 times, and then somebody gets hurt or a lamp gets knocked over and you just like flip your lid and it just ends chaotically. Before you turn on cartoons in the morning, you would say, okay, but like sequencing is what we call it. First we do this, then we do that. We're not doing anything until we do a redo of last night, because you're helping to leave a new imprint on their brain and then in the calm moment the next morning is when you're teaching. Let me show you a picture of what a broken arm looks like, right? Like, let me show you, let me help you understand that, like, how money works. Like, lamps can't just get broken. They need to be replaced, right? Like, you're a teacher and then you're having them redo where you say stop and they listen. And then they go find a different way to have fun. And then they make a plan for where they're going to do parkour tomorrow. That would be a redo. A role play is when you might use Legos or baby dolls to practice what it looks like to do the life skill that they're missing when they misbehaved. Maybe it's self-calming. Maybe it's speaking differently to a teacher, or staying quiet during a school assembly versus like giggling with your friends. Whatever the life skill is, you have them practice, because play is often the road to a child's mind. We say play and touch is the road to a child's mind. So if you can get them into a play type environment, they're going to accept the lesson and solidify the lesson into their cells and like beings a lot easier than if you try to just lecture them on why it's not okay to jump off the beds.
Yeah. So would that be a similar solution for like children that are struggling with like physical reactions, like hitting or,
Yes.
either parents
All
or other children?
All of it. So self-calming, yes. Logical consequences, absolutely. Natural gets a little tricky because you wouldn't want to necessarily just allow that, right?
Sure.
But there is natural consequences when a kid gets handsy with somebody and then they don't get invited to the birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a natural consequence, right? But we're not going to lean on natural consequences in that scenario.
Sure.
Now with siblings, you can play around with it a little bit more, and because we teach sibling conflict resolution from an angle of like, you cannot control your kids. You're gonna want to teach them self-regulation, self-control, and peaceful conflict resolution so they can solve their own problems.
Right.
And as kids get older, sometimes that looks like, especially if they're both like highly involved in the fights and smacking each other, sometimes that can look like a red spot that you don't always, because we're not octopi. We can't constantly be like perfectly breaking up the fights. And so that's kind of an example of where a natural consequence might come into play. But then you still have to come into the back with teaching of like, you're not crazy. You're brothers, your siblings. And here's why you want to do this different. Here's why you want to do this different. Here's how you do it differently. And then with all of that, you just want to make sure the modeling is super on point. And if it's not, you don't feel shameful about it.
Right.
You just get the help that you need so you can break that reactive cycle, because you will never, ever get your children to do what you want if you are not modeling it.
We just need to put that on a t-shirt. I wear it to parents everywhere.
Yeah, it's true. I know it's
Oh.
depressing sometimes, because just last week I was cleaning up and I was like, dang it, I just want to be that parent here where I'm like, do as I say, not as I do, because I was like, I kind of like moaned a little bit about Taryn, my little guy, leaving some stuff around. He leaves like cups
Mhm.
and I'm like, oh, kids. And then I like look down and there's my sandals and my purse and everything. And I'm like,
Sure.
I just want to be that parent who's like, I get to do this because I'm the boss. I'm the parent,
Boss.
right? And
Mhm.
it's just not the way it works with kids. It's just
Mhm.
not authentic, and it just doesn't make sense logically, right? Like if we're bummed that the house
Mhm.
is messy, then if we take responsibility and again model what we want from our children, they just follow behind so much easier, and then we're actually operating as a team.
Oh, for sure. My husband and I have talked about, I thought marriage was sanctifying. Parenthood has been the most sanctifying experience because it's having the humility, I think, being parents that want to break generational paradigms that we had in our homes growing up, to now being in a place where we're like, we want to do things differently, but also
Yeah.
understanding this is really hard.
Yes.
It is coming from a place of, I think you said it earlier, being a lot more curious, being a lot more patient, and and asking for wisdom and a community and a village that's also affirming me when I said, "Hey, I like lost it at the library this week,
Yeah.
guys." you know,
Yeah.
that I have people speaking into that and saying, "Hey, that's okay. We'll try." Like
Totally.
we'll try again.
Yes, I love it. The yes, we'll try again. The people who are there for you to say, you're human, you're doing a great job. And that also don't like justify it, right? Like that's cool once you start
Hmm.
to develop the community where um they're not like, well, that kid asked for it, It's like, what do you like, that's what you have
Right.
to do. It's like the once you start to like build friendships in a community where people really are like, oh, it makes sense. And like, you got this tomorrow. I know this is important to you.
Hmm.
And what are you going to do to take care of yourself today? So tomorrow you can try again and not yell or whatever it is.
Exactly. And I think the most healing thing, and we've already touched on it, is the affirmation that they're children. Not that they
Yeah.
don't have, like you said, the understanding, or they're at the development stage not to get it quite yet, but the fact that they're human and they're children. And this is totally like totally normal, which I'm so thankful it's I think now more generationally aware that we're actually having this conversation, and it's a blessing because people
Yeah.
now understand, or at least entertaining the idea that kids will be kids. And we, for so long, or at least my husband and I have noticed, the expectations that we have for our son are expectations that we have not had for ourselves. So an example would be, having our 3-year-old sit at church quietly for a full hour. And
Right.
yet we'll
Great
look
example.
over to our neighbors or ourselves that just have to scroll on Facebook real quick. So we don't even have the full presence to sit quietly, fully focused for 1 hour. And yet
Right.
the expectation is that our son will sit still and quietly while also managing the judgment from other people, around us, seeing our
Yes.
son that's coloring, climbing, playing with toys, because they also are sitting on their phones as grown adults.
Yes. It's so true. I love that story, Raina. Yes. Way to like have real awareness there of what's actually happening, right? And the expectation. That's beautiful. Yeah, I had it happen. Um, I had like my daughter this last weekend at a match. She was like doing some like favoring behavior of she'd be like, Daddy, look, Daddy, sit here. And I was like so triggered by it.
Mhm.
I was so triggered by it, like big trigger. Like it took me like a day to recover. And I was so hurt and all the things. And I was talking with my team who has become like my community. So the women I pay, my
Yeah.
coaches, I sometimes come to them and say, man, this was a tough one for me. Like help me see the truth here and help me find clarity. And my head coach was actually like, Wendy, like this is actually probably a great example of a very normal egocentric behavior, which teens and like teen specialists, we actually just interviewed like a polyvagal parenting teen specialist last week that talked about the egocentric brain of a teenager and how a lot of times they're just not thinking about the people around them and how their behavior affects them. And that didn't make her mean or like she doesn't care about me or I'm less liked parent. It was just her just of course like daddy's like the ultimate rock star volleyball dad, so like of course, right, she was just like sit next to me, the stats on this team, or we just sent this email to this Cal Poly coach last night. And so it just helped me to normalize the behavior and see like clearly like what was happening of this is developmentally appropriate. She's just a kid. She wasn't out to harm me or hurt me. And then we ended up having a beautiful discussion around it together and feeling more connected after we had some conflict
Mm.
resolution, which is the biggest beauty of this work. And especially when it comes to compassionate discipline is you do the hard moments, the challenges, you end up feeling closer to your children afterwards. Yes, you have to teach. Yes, you have to have heartfelt um, conversations and, you know, do the work it takes to figure out how you're going to teach and all the things. But afterwards, it really becomes a connecting thing versus a disconnecting thing. And that's for when kids are little too. I have lots of
Mhm.
memories of
Absolutely.
working with the kids because I've had this organization so long. I have some of it on video where we sat and worked through peaceful conflict resolution, creating charts, I am statements when they were probably like 7 and 4, you know. So you can do this stuff really, really young and it works.
Yeah, it's so encouraging. How can we get connected with you? What services do you offer, your program, all of that?
Thank you, Raina, for asking. So come find our podcast, The Fresh Start Family Show. We've got about 250 episodes, weekly episodes with experts and authors and some solo episodes I do. My husband co-hosts with me sometimes. And so it's called The Fresh Start Family Show. And then I'm at Fresh Start Wendy on Instagram. So come find me there. We also just started a new YouTube channel called Fresh Start Family, which
Wow.
is fun. Yeah, we put our podcast there now, which is really a fun new place to grow in. And then I'd say since we talked so much about discipline today, Raina, maybe I'll just let listeners know about our free Quick Start Learning Bundle for compassionate discipline. And
Mm.
they can learn more about that. freshstartfamilyonline.com/discipline. Or you can just send me a DM with the word shift on Instagram. I'm at Fresh Start Wendy, and we'll get you into that free instant download Quick Start Learning Bundle.
Ah, I love that. Yay.
Lots.
I can't wait to get everyone plugged in. So, Wendy, we have one more closing question that we close with all
Yeah.
of our guests. So, if you could provide any wisdom to your younger self or for our community that is listening, what would you share?
Oh, young wisdom for when my younger self. I'll just say what comes to my heart right away. And that would be to work on releasing shame earlier. So I think I really started, like, I just got the memo probably later than I would have loved to, but it's all perfectly part of the journey. That shame was like really at the root of a lot of my triggers and my difficulties in life, my challenges, feeling like wasn't getting what I wanted, whether it was relationship, parenting, whatever. And so I would have started that healing journey a lot earlier and just looking at where is shame inside of me? Where do I think I'm not doing a good enough job? Where am I very judgmental of myself? And just getting the resources to unpack that. We now have a program called Freedom to Be that we do twice a year, once in person, once online, where we go deep into like healing from shame.
Mm.
And that's just unlocked so much for me that I feel like could have made the past even easier if I got the support that I needed earlier on. So be aware of it. I thought for a long time that I didn't have any because I was like a super confident. I would wear cheetah jackets and like just felt like
Yeah.
I was outspoken. But then I realized, oh, I actually have a lot of self-doubt and a really strong inner critic that needed healing. So that's my answer.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you, Wendy. This was a beautiful conversation. I feel personally so empowered after this. So I know that your impact on your community is tenfold. So thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Rita, for having me.
And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thank you for listening, friend. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you don't want to miss any wisdom or encouragement, be sure to subscribe to the show. And don't forget to rate and review. Your feedback means so much and helps our community grow. If you're looking for more wellness wisdom and free resources, head over to livingwiselywell.com or get connected with me on Instagram at wiselywell. And if you're looking for a break from the hurried health lifestyle, check out my Return to Rest resource for tangible ways to slow down and finally find rest.